as you know from prior years, we mix up our keynote presentations with fireside chats. And this year we have 4 fireside chats sprinkled over the next 2 days. As you can see, our assemblage of chairs are coming out. And the first one will actually be one that's a little bit different. Not all the participants will be here in the room. And so you need to stay tuned to find out exactly how that works. But we're extremely privileged to have outstanding speakers for all of our fireside chats and an outstanding moderators for both days. And so without further ado, it's my pleasure to bring to the stage Steve Clemons of The Atlantic to moderate our first panel. Hey, Steve.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Michael. And do we have Bill? Hello, Bill. Good morning, everyone. What
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Intimate gathering we have here. And then where we have Bill. Thank you all for joining us this morning. We're going to have a discussion that thinks about the future of innovation. And for that, we wanted to beam in one of the everyone in industry has a title that they must bear, but I'm going to create a title for Bill Rue. He's basically the chief advocate in GE for the industrial internet, happens also to be vice president and corporate officer of GE Global Software and headquarters. So it's great. He's off somewhere far, and he's going to participate in a discussion. And here with me on stage, we have Michael Jones. The most important title he has was that he's been an inventor and computer programmer since the 4th grade. He takes education very seriously. Along the way, he invented Google Earth at a company that Google acquired, and he has been chief technologist of Google Maps, Google Earth, and local search, and he's now the chief technology advocate at Google. He and I happen to know each other. I sort of think he's kind of the chief cool guy at Google, and he's a lot of fun. And I guess, Bill, to start things off, when you discuss innovation and you think about disruption, and I know you've been really laying the ground on the industrial internet, maybe you could share with us a little bit how you see that, what the convergence is of big data, the fact that you guys in GE make all these machines, and as I talked with your team the other day, you look at these machines as sort of data generators, and walk us through that a little bit, and then I'm going to bring Michael into this.
Yeah, it's really interesting that what we're seeing is every machine we're building is becoming more and more intelligent, and we're finding that sensors technology, the price of sensor technology is coming down to where we've gone from 0 sensors to 20 sensors, and we predict we'll see hundreds of sensors on whether it's a jet aircraft engine or a gas turbine. And if you just look at, for example, one sensor on a gas turbine can generate 500 gigabytes per day, and there's 12,000 of them globally. So when we start to look at the amount of information that gets generated off these machines, it starts to really even dwarf the way I think a lot of sort of the consumer internet looks at big data.
So what do you do with that data? What do you do with that data, Bill? What do you do with you've got all these sensors. So we have a lot of sensors, we have a lot of data. How does it make the world better?
Yeah, well, the interesting thing we see is that this is going to become potentially the largest productivity driver for the industries we serve. And we kind of call this a power of one. A 1% change in the consumption of, let's say, aircraft engine fuel can have a $3 billion a year impact. So if you look at within any of the industries we serve, they're looking for productivity, and the productivity is going to come from operations. And it's going to come from how do people get deep insight into the operations of whether it's a gas turbine or a jet aircraft engine or so on, and then they change their behavior to drive productivity for that business. And we think without it, there's no way to do that, because just the size and complexity of the data is too great for them to be able to calculate that on their own.
Well, let me bring Michael into this discussion. Michael is here maybe with a little bit less echo. But Michael, great to have you. Tell us a little bit how, Google, which essentially started out as a search algorithm, now you're making driverless cars, or at least creating this. You're essentially you're beating the government in part at geospatial intelligence with Google Maps. How do you view the role you play in disruption and innovation? And I'd love to hear a little bit about the disruption. Who are you dislodging? Who are you ticking off out there that's pissed off that you guys are making the headway you are?
Well, I think that last part's pretty easy to answer. Our enemy, so to speak, or people who have declared us as enemy, are people who are wedded to a past that's more comfortable than the reality of the present. Our goal is always to just explore what's possible. It's an engineer's mindset, just to see what could be done, what would be the most important change we could make in anything in life, and what would be the best way to make that change. And we do those two things together. And if we can find a better way to make things work, we're all over that. And so that's it creates discomfort sometimes with people who kind of have their business, they like their business, they might inherit it from their grandfather, and they don't want anything to change, and that causes some grief. Maybe some publishing businesses have some angst about that. Magazines? Maybe. Yeah. Lesser magazines.
Yeah.
Fine magazines like The Atlantic don't have any problem. But anyway, the big thing, though, about all of this is the role of information to improve people's lives. There's we're here in D.C., I'm a student, a scholar of Thomas Jefferson. Jefferson always wrote about how knowledge and information were the cornerstones of American freedom and liberty. And he believed in that with all his heart. And Google believes that too, that more information leads to better lives. People make better decisions. So adding information to people makes their life better. And what we've done, it's kind of unusual for us, is we've found ways to take everybody's information to work collectively. And a quick example would be if you've used Gmail, Google Mail. You probably don't get a lot of Viagra ads. Or you might, I don't know your situation, but the point is that people get spam email. It's a well understood social problem. But in Google Mail, you don't usually get that. And what happens is somebody in, say, California or Tokyo or England got that mail and they said, this is spam. And then somebody else in Rio said, this is spam. By the time you wake up, 100,000 people have said, this is spam, and we don't show it to you. We put it in your spam folder. We don't have some magic insight. We just have hundreds of millions of users saying, this is bad, this is bad, this is bad, and we see a pattern. We relegate that mail to spam. So it's as though we have the great insight, and in fact, people have the great insight. So we just trust users.
So when you think about the future, we've got Bill here in GE. GE has, as I understand it, 43,000 engines in service today, and each one of these engines kicks off data. And and we now have the capacity today to actually hold all that data and sort through it. And I guess that's big data. Yeah. But we also have that in health. We have it in other areas. You and I were talking about the fact that if you had free and open access to everyone's medical file, they were digitized, and you could do it. You could probably go out in the United States today and solve and cure a few serious diseases
Absolutely.
and ailments across the
Absolutely.
way. But what is the barrier to that? And do you guys think about that?
Oh, we think about it all the time. So for example, this is a pretty big room. It's definitely the case there are people in here who will die prematurely from diseases that could be solved if evidence-based medicine was allowed to do analysis of covariance of medical trends and treatments. That is, your doctor isn't as smart as the sort of Google spam fighting technique. If we could just get your records. We don't want your records. I don't care if Google gets them, the NIH should get them, or the World Health Organization. Take all the personal part out, but say at this age the person was smoking, and at this age they had a skin problem, at this age they got cancer. Those kinds of things, globally, a few billion people, a few 100 million people, would be enough to sort of reverse engineer the human organism in its disease-fighting situation. Most medical tests are done on 500 people or 1,000 people. We have 1 billion people every day that use our products. If we could use those scale of information, we could cure many diseases. And why don't we do that? We don't do that because legislation like HIPAA and other things designed to protect your privacy and security, which is great, have the side effect of preventing anybody from using the data in a constructive way. So next time you go to the doctor, just as a personal point, you might say, hey, can I get a copy of that x-ray to take home? Why don't you mail that to me? And they'll give you an excuse why you had to pay for the x-ray. It's your x-ray, it's your body, but you're not allowed to have the x-ray. And that's true for power meters. You know, people make intelligent power meters, but there are rules and the PUCs make it so that power companies have a real problem just mailing you the data. We built something called Google Power Meter where you could see a real-time EKG of power usage. And everybody that installed that saved about 10 to 15% on their power bill. There's nothing that's going on in the world right now that would save 15% immediately on power. We could do that, or anybody could do that. The problem is you can't get the data. It's a secret from you.
Bill, let me bring you back, and again, I'm going to ask you to speak a little more slowly because you've got 3,000 people listening to you, and it's the largest hall. It's bigger than a mega church in here, and so you echo. But I want to come back to this question to some degree of thinking about innovation. We're being hosted today by ARPA-E, Department of Energy. This is government. We're in Washington, D.C., sort of, here in National Harbor. And when I look at innovators, whether in big companies like GE or there are small firms that got bought by Google, every single major innovator I know, and maybe I have limited vision, doesn't think about necessarily that their vision and what they're trying to accomplish is a function of government prerogatives. They usually look at government, if they think about government at all, they look at it as a constraint. And I'm interested in how you two innovators and thinkers look at government. Is it a partnership? Is it irrelevant? Are all of you shaping and changing the world? How do you view this connection as we discuss things like big data, the industrial internet? What is the appropriate role and function of government in the world you're carving?
Well, I think that, and the healthcare example is a great one, because in the end, as we start to innovate, you know, the idea of regulation can sometimes be an inhibitor for it. On the other hand, the ability to drive standards and openness can sometimes allow innovation to move faster. And I think how you get that balance has to be done with government. So you have to make sure that the regulation that's intended to protect doesn't have unintended consequences of stopping innovation. At the same time, you want to make sure that standardization doesn't get to the point where people who are innovating are not rewarded for that innovation. So this idea of how we work together is really enormously important to making that work. At the same time, you know, if you look at least in big companies, and some of the studies show that breakthrough innovations almost always come from someone in a company who has a really great idea and a passion about it, usually a very small dedicated team who shares that, and then, you know, someone in a suit who protects them and allows them to come out with that innovation. So I think the idea of the role of the government has to be, as innovation comes from companies like us, how do we work together to make sure that we can drive it out to the industry and standardize where we need to, but at the same time make sure we protect the individual as is appropriate.
Michael, what's the ecosystem of great ideas? What do you need in a system to generate real innovation? What are the various component pieces beyond, you know, the smart notion itself?
Well, the first thing, of course, is the active innovation, which is sort of like, you know, if you see a girl and you say, I've got to date that girl, it's not like whether or not it makes sense. It's just you say, I have to try. She might laugh at me, but I just have to try. So people that are innovators have this, they're compelled to try. They'd rather fail than to fail to try. And that, for example, would not be the case of the federal government and Solyndra, for example, but that would be the case of all the startups that make a difference. People say, I don't know if it'll work. I'm going to mortgage my house. Maybe I'll be homeless, but I will have found out whether or not liquid batteries work. You know, so that mindset is a kind of a dangerous, irrational mindset, but it's everything that you rely on that you think is great comes from that mindset. Absolutely everything. So I think so. So that's the first part. The second part is most of the inventors are pretty clueless about business. So you know, you're the artist, you can paint the painting, but you can't like maybe set up a gallery, or you can invent the transistor, but you can't like necessarily run Intel. This is a totally separate skill set. So there's often a dance between the guy with the idea and the people that have the torque to fulfill that idea. And that's one of the roles for GE or Google or Amazon, Microsoft, whatever, is that sometimes the little company has a great idea, but they're not a big company. And so that's an issue. And then the third part that I think I'll like to go into is the government or the sort of the social, the societal role about that. So these things don't exist, technologies don't exist in abstract. They're like the Prius is a great thing, but do you want to be seen driving a Prius? Well, apparently you do. It makes you look cool. But the point is, maybe it made you look uncool. Then you wouldn't buy it. It wouldn't matter how good it was if you thought it made you look uncool. So there's a social, societal dynamic around that. So if everybody wanted to share their data, medical data, then the laws would get changed because they'd complain to their Congress. If everybody wanted to share their power meter data, the laws would get changed. So there's an enablement that can happen in government just by making it okay to do things that were formerly not okay. And something Bill mentioned that I think is worth pointing out is that government has, from a technology standpoint, a terrible track record of one thing. I'm talking about Congress now and state legislatures. They pass laws about regulating methods instead of aspirational laws about regulating desired outcomes. And so in California, we had a law passed recently that you can't do text messages while you're driving a car. Now, Apple iPhone, Google Android phones, all can do speech to text. So you can just talk to your phone. Say, send a mail to my wife saying I'll be home in 10 minutes. That's still illegal. You can talk to somebody sitting in the seat, but you can't talk to your phone because the congressperson or representative didn't think that you could do that. So they passed laws about what they know instead about what they want, which is you shouldn't be distracted. You have extra liability if you're distracted and cause an accident. Whatever laws they could have passed, they didn't. They said, no, you can't send a message. Because the conception of sending a message was whatever they do on their BlackBerry or something. And that kind of low thinking is all the technologists in the world just gnash their teeth about laws like that.
Maybe I can ask both of you to reflect for a moment. We probably have sitting in this room the geniuses that are going to address and solve the global energy problem. And I say global because I think if real advances are made here in the United States, they will be globally significant and relevant. And I'd be interested in particularly, Bill, with the way you have conceptualized data and analytics and production, this notion of the industrial internet. What do you think aspirationally GE, which of course came out of Thomas Edison and came out of the energy field, what are the next big leaps that you think are vital and that we may be on the cusp of that would be enabled by the ecosystem that you've shared with us? And I want to ask Michael the same thing from a kind of Google perspective and what you see in the energy dimension. What are some of the puzzles that you think your work can undo? Okay. Bill?
Well, I think that there's probably three areas that are starting to become very interesting, in terms of innovation. One, and all this related to the big data. One is just in really exploration. And we're seeing the better modeling, the ability to collect more data is beginning to pinpoint and allow people who are doing drilling and so on to find and pull out more than ever before. So we see that ability to begin to do modeling is really changing the nature of exploration. In addition, it's being applied in a second way, which is we're seeing that people are able to pull more out of fields than ever before because they can begin to see through the data what's actually happening under the ground, and as a result get more production than ever before. And there are companies who specialize in buying up fields that look like they're done, and then suddenly they're able to produce and surprise people. But where we really see is what can be done to just enhance in real time, operate a lot of the machinery to make it more efficient. And if I just look at how you operate a gas turbine or how you operate a wind turbine, most of the decisioning is done ahead of time. So how you place the wind turbines and so on, instead of in real time controlling the wind turbine so that in that field, the turbines that are in the second and third rows are adjusted to account for how the first row of wind turbines and the following airflow is occurring. This idea of real-time manipulation based on sensor data, this idea of real-time controls is going to become extraordinarily important. This is how we'll see the next generation of 5%, 10%, 20% gains, is through how I optimize the production, the generation, the distribution of power, and how I optimize the whole system in real time. The one thing that's interesting is the amount of data you need is tremendous. Number two, the processing has to be done in near real time. So if I learn it 3 days later how to adjust it, that doesn't do me any good. I may feel good, I got the result, but it didn't optimize it. So when we start to look at innovation, things that can innovate on the operational side, we think is the best opportunity going forward, because most of the money is spent in operating that machinery. Most of the waste occurs in that we didn't quite get the optimization right of the whole system. So this is where we see the greatest opportunity and where we're putting a lot of attention. And so that's kind of how we see innovation and great opportunity for this big data and software and analytics area.
Great. Michael?
Well, I would follow on maybe with the other side of that, which is big data as an aggregation of little data. So from little things, big things grow. And as an example, when you generate power, I was involved in a control system for a hydro plant one time. When you generate power, you're getting data about power needs, you're spinning up these turbines, and it's a huge effort. It takes 20 minutes to increase the speed because of vibration and so forth. So you can imagine another way of doing it, which is to say a network, a grid, where the devices can talk, and they can talk to your house, and inside your house all the devices could talk, and I could have an auction. So the power meter could tell your house, power's going up, it's going to be cheap for the next 20 minutes, and it's going to be really heavy for about an hour and a half, then it's going to be cheap again for 15 minutes, and so your refrigerator says, well, I'm going to run the compressor now and get the stuff really cold, then I'm going to coast through the expensive part. That sounds silly, but it's trivial to do that. And so things like that, where your house and all the consumers can make strategic decisions about when to cool, when to not cool, when to do things, when to not do things, would allow load levelization across a continent. And in fact, the power company can say, we got a problem with that turbine. Why don't you guys use 5% less if you could?
So you told me something really interesting in the green room. You said that you've suspended this Google meter that would have allowed someone like me who was connected to look at my energy coming from the local utility, and it would tell me how I was doing, how much I was using. I could manipulate it one way or another, turn off the lights, etc. But you suspended it. Why did you suspend it? Because it sounds like in the world of talking machines and talking sensors, you were there, but then you pulled the plug on your own deal.
Right, we did that. So Microsoft did the same thing, and the truth is we both gave up. Because the combination of the public utility companies, power companies, the combination of the grid itself, the power meters, despite Echelon, all these things created an environment where 1 in 1,000 persons really had access to that data, either because of technical infrastructure issues or because of a matter of will, or because of unclear laws, or whatever it was. So basically, we had proven this thing. Everybody that had it saved 15% on their power bill, because they would see the little thing and they would go look to see what was making noise, and they would turn off the lights, or they would upgrade the refrigerator. So it was fantastic. It would have a bigger impact than anything you could imagine doing for power in the United States, and yet it just wasn't possible. The technology was trivial, but the social, societal aspects of it just weren't there. And that's an area where I think government can really help. As an example, I suggested something to Eric Schmidt to mention to the president one time. I said, look, the largest buyer of automobiles in the United States is the U.S. Postal Service. So you should make a thing where you say every 6 months you're going to put out a bid for electric cars for the postman. And you know, you don't do like a 20-year contract. Do like a 6-month contract. And all these companies, kind of like an X prize. You know, you say if you like have the better car in 6 months, I'll buy 100,000 of them. And the appeal for a manufacturer would be extraordinary. And then you start out, say I'll pay 50% more than the gas price, and then you say I'll pay 40% and then 30%. So over like a 5-year period or 3-year period, you could have the world's largest fleet of electric vehicles. Well, the government's going to buy something. Why not buy those? So there are many things like that. It turns out that the post office is a lot like FedEx with Congress as a board member. And so it just was impossible to make that really work. But it would have worked trivially. So there's so many things if engineers ran the world, so to speak, decisions would be made differently. It's not a better world necessarily, but differently. And there's a country like that. It's called the People's Republic of China. Most of their leaders are engineers. They don't make excuses. You know, right now we have this political thing where everybody says the buck starts here. And engineers just look at the facts and say, well, that's not working. We'll stop doing that. That is working. We'll do more of that. There's just an obvious thing. Every business executive does that, and politicians seem genetically predisposed not to do that.
So am I hearing you're high on you're high on Chinese-style engineering engineers in power?
No, I just point out.
I just want to make sure
I'm not sure that's. Here's the thing. I think they're more likely to achieve their goals. Whether their goals are goals that you know I or Thomas Jefferson would like, I don't know. But it's a question of efficacy, not a question of desirability. Anybody that can lie to themselves about the truth is dangerous.
Bill, we just have a few minutes left. I wanted to ask you in the next couple of minutes just to share with this room not just GE's perspective on where you're going, but what you think the most important lesson for innovators are. This is a room packed full of innovators thinking through these challenges. What do you think? You're in a big company. You're taking care of many of these are small companies here, so I'd love to get your insights on what you think the most important ingredients of success are, or how to deal with failure.
Yeah, what we see, if we look at the last decade, and I think Google has been at the center of this, is that the impact of the internet on the consumer world has been fairly dramatic, and all of those consumer businesses have been remade as a result. It really hasn't had the same impact in the industrial space. On the energy, it hasn't been embraced and adopted. In order to achieve many of the kinds of things Michael talked about, the technology, the infrastructure has to be there. So if we start to look, the good news is the technology from sensors, the cost of processing driven by cell phone technology is allowing us to make devices more intelligent, to allow us to collect information in new ways, to build sensors we couldn't before. So there's a real opportunity for us to rethink what an intelligent machine or an intelligent asset looks like. The second thing is there's a real opportunity for us to think about an industrial internet, the ability for those things to connect. Now that comes with it a whole new approach to cybersecurity we're going to have to think about. And so this is, we think, a great opportunity for innovation. On top of that, though, there's a whole new way for us to think about applications. And we think that in the same way there's been this consumer apps, we're going to see machine apps. And so as we see kind of innovation, we think that the technology that's really driven the consumer internet can remake the industrial area, the energy area, but unless we go down that path of creating that kind of a industrial internet, the connection of the machines, the cybersecurity, and the new way to think about apps, all driven by lots of data, lots of analytics, unless we have that in place, it's going to be very hard for us to see the innovation occur at a rapid pace in the same way we see it on the consumer side. And so we think that's the grand challenge for us. That's what we have to create. That's what we have to push forward. And we've got to get the energy world to embrace that architecture in the same way we've seen the consumer world. And I think that's a grand challenge for us to work in the energy space over the next decade.
Thank you so much, Bill. I'm going to come to Michael. I think next year when we have you here, we're going to put a green screen behind you with like a beach or, I don't know, GE moving machines or something. But you look great. Michael, thoughts on what you'd share with this crowd on changing the future?
The changing the future is about innovation. Innovation is fundamentally about failure. Basically you try things that aren't known to work. That's what ARPA was famous for, trying things that might not work. It's not about implementing solutions, that's engineering, but invention or innovation or science is about asking new questions. Questions nobody asked. Questions that may have no answer, questions that may have a really bad answer. So the life of an innovator is a garage full of half-finished projects that as soon as you realize it was a dog, you stop doing it.
Do you have any big failures you want to talk about at Google?
Oh yeah, sure, we've got plenty of failures. But the key is that we have plenty of successes as well. And the key there, for example, the self-driving car. The reason we could do it, nobody else could do it, so to speak, is because we're willing to fail trying. Most people aren't willing to fail trying. They need to be seen as succeeding. So we're okay about that. We try. It happened to work. Maybe it didn't work, but it's okay. We'll find out. We try something else. So I think that spirit of trying, you haven't failed if you haven't failed to try. So that's fundamental to being an innovator, and I think it's fundamental to financial support as well. Like foggy path investing. If Slender didn't work, invest in the guy across the street.
Right.
Don't stop investing. Start investing.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, you've heard from two big players in innovation. Michael and Bill happen to both be at very large firms. I know that one of the challenges out there is that it's not always a big firm behind you that's dealing with things. But the world is going to be very different tomorrow, and we're rushing into it. I was out at Intel recently, walked across a rug, and they've got sensors built into rugs looking at the way people walk that can sense stroke, the likelihood of stroke. So it's just a very different world that we're barreling into. Audi just was in D.C. with one of their self-parking cars. So you guys, for anyone who has trouble parallel parking, it will soon all be taken care of. But I want to thank you all very, very much. I want to thank Bill for joining us from whatever remote secret site GE has you stashed in. And I want to thank Michael Jones, who probably can figure it out with Google Earth where you are. But Michael, thank you for all you've done. Thank all of you for your attention and time.
Thank you.